Hey guys, and welcome to Module 7 of the White Code Compass. I'm pretty excited about this module because this is it's an administrative module, right? It's not so much a module about how to think, how to feel. It's a module just about kind of covering your bases from an administrative standpoint when it comes to building a school list. Building a school list is important. Ultimately, at some point, you have to decide where you want to go to medical school. You have to make a list of schools that are interesting to you, schools that are attractive to you. And you have to figure out the strategy that you're going to use to make that list. At the end of the day, there's over 180 medical schools in the United States when you include MD and DO schools together. You can't possibly apply to all of them, or at least I hope that you wouldn't. And so you have to find a way to narrow down the list of schools that you're going to apply to. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how to research schools, like how to look them up. How do you actually, find information about these schools? We're going to look up this very important thing. We're going to talk about how to identify a school's mission, how to figure out what a school actually cares about. We're going to talk about I don't want to say myth, I want to say pseudo myth of safety, target, and reach schools, which is probably something you have already seen stuff about on Student Doctor Network, maybe Reddit. This is a thing that I want to dispel some information about and maybe even reframe your mindset towards. I want to talk about building relationships with schools, with institutions. I want to talk about some important considerations when you're building your list and actually like how to actually do that, how to actually build the list once you've kind of nailed all this stuff down. I want to talk about when to make the school list. When is it that you should be thinking about where you want to go to medical school? And then we got a little bonus at the end. So let's start with how to research schools. Now, the absolute must-have, in my opinion, is the MSAR, the Medical School Admissions Requirements. It's kind of got a weird name because medical school admissions requirements doesn't make you think that it's like a database of all the medical schools in the country, which is really what it is. It should be called the Medical School Database. I don't know. Now, specifically, the MSAR is for MD schools only. DO schools have their own kind of thing called DO Explorer. And that's a great tool, very similar to the MSAR in just about every way. The MSAR is $20 for 1 year. And I think there's like a $36 for 2 years subscription. Nonetheless, if you can cough up 28 bucks, in my opinion, you are going to get some of the best information that you could possibly ask for when it comes to researching schools. Now, I'm going to give you an alternative to the MSAR. It's not a better alternative. It is arguably a worse alternative, but it is a free alternative in case you don't want to spend the money. But I encourage you, if it means working a few extra hours at your job or asking your parents for a few extra bucks, this is a tool that I don't think you really want to overlook. And I'm going to give you a quick peek at kind of how it works in a moment. But just suffice it to say, the MSAR is literally a list of all medical schools in the country. You can see all kind of different things. You can sort the schools by location, cost, stats, meaning what is their kind of median MCAT, medium GPA. You can see the class sizes, what the class distribution is from men to women and races, things like that. All kind of cool information. Now, I want to also make it known that ChatGPT can compile smaller lists for free. It accesses public information on schools' websites in order to do this. I've tried a very broad, different series of prompts in order to get ChatGPT to make a list of every medical school in the country with all of this data and export it into an Excel spreadsheet. And it typically just gives up after about 5 schools. I think the workload for that is just too robust. And I'm no expert in ChatGPT, but I do know that if you want to, you could go school by school by school, or 5 schools by 5 schools by 5 schools, or maybe schools in Georgia, schools in Tennessee, schools in South Carolina, and just kind of do it that way. Nonetheless, it is a tool that you can use. I wouldn't overlook it, especially because it is free. Now, if there's something ultra specific that you want to know about a school, for whatever reason, just keep in mind you can go to schools' websites and look up just about anything that you want to see. In addition to that, you can just call the school, you know what I mean? Jump on the phone and ask to speak to an admissions advisor or an admissions counselor for that medical school. They're going to tell you a lot of great stuff. In fact, I used to do this all the time when I was a pre-medical student. I used to call schools in my state and just, kind of shoot the breeze, as they say. I liked this because it felt like I was kind of developing a little bit of a connection with the schools. They were able to give me information, kind of insider information that maybe everyone else didn't really have, kind of clue you into really what's going on beneath the cover, beneath the surface. You may have a lot of luck with calling schools, you may not, but nonetheless, you can always look at their websites. Now, something I want to clarify about this. You're looking up schools. You're acquiring information about schools. You are maybe writing this information down in an Excel spreadsheet. You're categorizing schools based on location or cost or things like that. This takes time. Like, this is not something you do in an afternoon. This is not something you do in a weekend. In my opinion, this is something you do over the course of months. Begin to kind of hone in on specific institutions. As you gain more information about some of them are going to become more attractive to you. Some of them are going to become less attractive to you. And that process just takes time. So give it time. Now, I want to give you a quick look at the MSAR, medical school admissions requirements. Again, this is owned by the AAMC, the same guys that own the MCAT, the same guys that own the medical school application for MD schools. But again, as you can see, you can filter by all these different things. You can filter by location. You can type in the name of a school. As you can see right here, there are 172 records. So there are 172 MD programs in the United States that are listed here, including the ones in Puerto Rico. As you can see, there's a fair amount of information like the median MCAT and median GPA that are only available to people who pay for the subscription, that $28. But there's a lot of things that you can see without paying, right? You can see what their application deadline is, although that's not really important information because we're going to talk about when you should actually apply to medical school, and it is long before the deadline. We're going to talk about, some other things too that are related to information that you find here, but nonetheless, you can see kind of just a quick overview of what's going on in these schools. What's the class size? What programs do they offer? Oh, interesting, right? BSMD, that's cool. MD MPH, MD MBA, MD PhD, cool. Tuition and fees, in-state, out-of-state. One thing that you're going to find very, very quickly is that private institutions typically have the exact same tuition for in-state and out-of-state. It is usually public institutions, your state medical schools, that have differences in their in-state and out-of-state tuition. So that is something to look at. And again, you can kind of filter by median MCAT. And if you scroll down, this is just a screenshot. But if you scroll down, you can filter by other things as well. So that's a little bit about the MSAR. Now, what categories should you put schools into? Well, there's an important consideration that I think you should think about right off the bat. And that is, of the schools that you're interested in, do they accept the majority of their students from in-state, or do they accept the majority of their students from out of state? So that's what IS means, OOS. You might say that a OOS school is a school that accepts, 50% or more of its students from out of state. An in-state school is going to be one that accepts a bulk of their students from in-state, as I said. And you want to get a feel for this by kind of looking at the MSAR to get a breakdown of where the students are actually coming from. Now, one thing to be certain of is that public schools and private schools probably in general have different preferences. Public schools want to accept students from their state because they're going to have funding from the state. They're going to give preference to students in the state, especially students that they think are going to stay in the state. So if you have strong ties to a state that you were born in, a state that you live in, a state that your family lives in, that public institution is probably going to prefer you. Private institutions, maybe not so much, although there are some exceptions to that rule that we will discuss. And then, of course, as I mentioned, just keep in mind the in-state versus out-of-state tuition. It costs a heck of a lot more to be an out-of-state student at a public university. There's one school, I think in Michigan, a public school in Michigan, that if you're an out-of-state student, the tuition alone is upwards of $90,000 a year. Obscene, in my opinion. So just keep that in mind. When you're thinking about how you should prioritize what schools you want to go to, this entire kind of situation here should be important. Do they even accept students from out of state? How many do they accept? And what is the cost to attend if you're an out-of-state student? Again, you can use ChatGPT to categorize these schools, sort schools by location, cost, stats, etc., and use schools' websites to get highly specific information related to this stuff. And you can do this related to just about anything, right? Anything about the school. Now, how do you identify a school's mission? Well, the obvious answer is go look at their website. But in my opinion, the school's mission and the school's mission statement are sometimes slightly different. But let's nail down why this is important. A school in general having a mission determines the emphasis that they put on the applicants that come into their school. For example, if a school has a strong preference for people who are interested in primary care fields of medicine, then they are going to give preference to students who express in their applications that they are interested in primary care medicine. Now, the mission statement may say something about primary care medicine. It's probably going to say something like, oh, our mission is to educate physicians to meet the needs of, whatever, in whatever state, or maybe especially meet the needs of, rural and whatever. Okay, great. A lot of schools have that. A lot of schools have a mission statement that, says something about, what they want to do for the underprivileged in their state, or the underserved in their state, or the rural in their state, or whatever have you. But what is their mission? Their mission is probably an extension of the mission statement, but their mission is something that is maybe a little bit less obvious. And sometimes you have to get to know the school to figure out what it is that they're really after. What is it that the current administration at the school cares about? And that's kind of what the mission is. It's like, what does the university care about right now based on who's in charge? And again, sometimes that's an extension of the mission statement, but sometimes it's a little more specific. Sometimes it's a little bit different. And that's why I say the mission likely involves more than just the mission statement alone. I think looking at a mission statement is not necessarily the way to decide what a school is all about. You have to talk to people at the school, talk to contacts that you have at the school, figure out what it is they're really after. Attend open house at a school. Drive out there for their open house. Just Google, Medical University of South Carolina open house, and see when their MD open house is. Attend webinars if they offer them. You can just Google this stuff. Talk to current and past students. Man, that's probably one of the best ways, because they're going to tell you exactly what you want to know about a university based on their experience with it. Lastly, join some Facebook groups, right? These are all just different ways you can acquire information about schools and get to see what they're really about. Figure out what it is that they want and kind of clue into that better. Now, why am I calling a safety target reach a pseudo myth? Well, the reason it's a pseudo myth and not a complete myth is that as a general concept, even though it is technically real, it places too much emphasis, in my opinion, on stats and not enough on personal fit. Well, what's personal fit all about? Are you aligned with the mission? And then other things related to, does it even make sense for you to go there based on location, all these other things. But ultimately, schools know what they want. And the target safety reach kind of situation, I think, ignores the fact that there are many, many, many factors that are not grades and MCAT scores that determine whether students are likely to get accepted at a given school based on what the school wants. There's other things to consider, right? Again, the location, cost, etc. Now, the stats do matter. Again, this is why it's a pseudo myth. Your stats do matter, but they should not really determine how you build your school list. There may be some exceptions to this rule, and they are in the extremes, but in general, in kind of the middle of the road medical schools that are not the NYUs, the Harvards, the Yales, stats should not determine how you build your list unless you're thinking about those kinds of schools, right? If I'm a middle of the road kind of applicant and have middle of the road GPA, middle of the road MCAT score, more than likely applying to schools like Harvard, applying to schools like Yale, applying to schools like NYU, schools that I have no ties with, it's likely a shot in the dark. But outside of the extremes, outside of the Ivy League, outside of the top 20 medical schools in the country based on grades and scores or whatever, I think stats don't matter as much as personal fit. I think when people build their school list based on this, they overlook authentic connections with the schools, the opportunities for authentic connections. Those authentic connections are, in my opinion, maybe one of the most important things that you can achieve with a medical school. How do you do that? Again, you do that through this right here, all those things. So I think this safety target reach pseudomyth works better when it accounts for other factors beyond stats alone. So what is it really? Like, what is safety target reach? Well, basically what it is it's based on your GPA, your 3.6 GPA and your 505 MCAT. What are schools that are likely to accept you, like very likely to accept you? That's safety. What are schools that you have a fair shot at? That's target. And what are schools that you're probably just not getting in there? That's reach. And so people say you need to build your school list based on you need a large majority of your schools coming from target. You need some schools coming from safety. You need some schools coming from reach. But the bulk of the schools in your list should be kind of schools that have scores that are aligned with yours. Again, this is all about grades and MCAT scores. It does not take into account all these other important things. So that's why I say it's a pseudomyth. I don't think you should build your school list based entirely on your grades and your scores. Now, what does it mean to build a relationship with schools? How do you actually do this? As I said before, what opportunities are available? It's the open houses, the webinars, and the meet and greets if you can make it to those things. And I encourage you to set aside time to do that. But here's the thing, connections require effort, right? You're not going to spontaneously, or at least you're unlikely to spontaneously develop a relationship with a medical school. You need to call, you need to email, you need to visit, you need to get to know people at that school, and they need to get to know you. Now, one of the most interesting ways that you form a connection with a medical school is actually by doing a special program at that school. For example, we briefly talked about research in the extracurriculars module, and I talk about this thing called an REU. REU stands for Research Experience for Undergraduates. And REUs, your university may have some, but many, many other universities do as well. And maybe perhaps you end up doing an REU at another university over the summer. And that's an excellent way to get to know a university, right? You're going to be working with their faculty, working with their scientists, maybe getting to know their admin a little bit. A lot of these REUs, the schools that have them know that those students are interested in going to medical school or graduate school. So they kind of bring the connection to you per se, right? You have a day where you get to talk to the administrators, talk to the deans, that kind of thing. That was the case for the REU that I did. So these are overlooked sometimes because it really builds a connection with the school. You get to be at the school. You get to live in the city for, the summer, 6 weeks or whatever it is. You get to talk to the people face to face, work with the people face to face. That's powerful. So don't overlook this. This is a kind of an unconventional method to forming a relationship with a school, but it's really good. I would argue that connections are more powerful than stats. Is this true 100% of the time? No, it's not. There are obviously many medical schools that prefer academic excellence above all else, but that is not the bulk majority of them. Academic excellence is expected, but how they define academic excellence varies from school to school. And connections can be the thing that gives you the leg up or the advantage over students who may have better academic stats than you do. So do not overlook connections and the power that they can have in your application. So tying this kind of stuff together, what are some important considerations you need to make when you are building your list? Well, what you have to do first is you have to form what I call a value hierarchy. What do you care about most in a medical school? Well, you should probably prioritize medical schools from which you have connections. If you have connections with a medical school already, well, it's safe to say that you should probably prioritize applying there because you are already a little bit more likely to get accepted there by virtue of your connection alone. Maybe after that, you need to be thinking about the mission and the personal fit. What is personal fit? Personal fit is, what does the school care about? Do you care about what the school cares about? Do they care about what you care about? Alignment with the mission and personal fit. Maybe then you want to look at stats. Maybe then you want to say, okay, I have a 3.6 GPA and a 500 MCAT. Safe to say most likely I will not be going to Harvard. Safe to say most likely I will not be going to Columbia. Safe to say I will not be going to Yale, right? So you do have to factor this in, but you should probably factor these things in more. Then you may want to look at the cost. You may want to find, or you may find that your local state medical school is half the price of, such and such private school that you may be interested in some other state. That's important. Unless your parents are paying for medical school or unless you're getting a full ride scholarship, which very few people do, you are more than likely going to pay for medical school with loans. Cost is important. How much debt do you want to have when you get out of medical school? Do you want to have more? Do you want to have less? Well, of course, the answer is less. So take that into account. Look at the cost. Organize by that, perhaps. And then perhaps you want to organize by location. And for some people, perhaps location is actually going to be very, very high on the list. If you're a person who wants to continue to live around home, live at home, live with your parents, live with your family, I've got peers in medical school that do that. It works great for them. They have very, very strong relationships with their family. They have that support system that you need in medical school, and it's much easier for them to keep that support system strong when they're living close to home or living at home. So maybe location is very, very important to you, and then you have to think about, hey, what are the schools that are in my area? So these are just some different things that you should start thinking about. That's a potential value hierarchy, but you can arrange these in any way that you want based on the things that are important to you. So your values may differ than the ones that I've listed here. Be true to yourself. Figure out what it is that's really important to you and structure your list that way. Now, also, something to consider is that applying to medical school actually costs money. tends to cost quite a bit. And with each additional application that you add, it costs more and more and more. If I'm not mistaken, the cost to apply this year is $140 for the first application and $40 for each subsequent application. So why do I say consider the role of FAP? Well, Fee Assistance Program, which I've talked about a couple times, which is the fee assistance program offered by the AAMC, gives you 20 free applications to medical school. Maybe you want to apply to more schools, that's fine. You'll have to pay for those, but you'll get 20 for free. And 20 is a great number. That's about how many schools many people apply to. I think the current number is somewhere between 15 and 20. So that's a great resource. It just slashes the upfront cost of applying to medical school. So this is something to keep in mind, right? When you're building your list, how long is your list? How many schools are on your list? You got to think about how much does it cost to apply to those schools. And if you have FAP, you can perhaps apply to more schools for essentially no money. Now, another important question to ask is, if school X is my only acceptance, am I actually going to attend? Of the 20 schools that you have on your list, for each one of them, you must ask yourself, if I get accepted to only that school, am I going to go? And if the answer is no, well, then why is it on your list? You should only put schools on your list, and you should only spend your money to apply to schools that you really do actually want to go to. And you say, well, how do I know if I want to go to a medical school? Well, it's all these other things, right? It's, well, for one, those are very important. It's, the connections that you have. It's, all these things right here. Have you formed a connection with the school? Do you know anything about the school, right? So those are all the things that you have to keep in mind when you're deciding, are you actually going to go if you get accepted? Otherwise, don't waste your time. Don't waste your money. Now, the little bonus here is a little thing called early decision programs. Now, what is early decision? Early decision is where you apply to only one medical school. And you can only apply to one medical school as part of an early decision program. But what you're saying is, I want to attend this medical school so badly. I am so committed to attending this medical school that I will forgo my other opportunities at other medical schools. I did this. I got accepted into the one school that I applied to, and I attended that medical school. Do I encourage this? I cannot say. I do not discourage this, and I do not encourage this. I tell people to look into your heart and to figure out what it is that you care about. And if you do identify a school that is so well aligned with what it is that you are looking for, if everything makes sense, if you have a connection with the school, if the location is right, if the cost is right, if the mission is right, if you're aligned with their objectives and everything is just all just perfect, perhaps you do want to consider applying early decision. Most medical schools would say that they give their early decision applicants a better look. They give them perhaps a better chance than their regular decision applicants, because they know and they understand that when you apply early decision to a medical school, you are putting all of your eggs in that basket. Now, not every medical school offers an early decision program. Many of them do. And so you will need to go to either the school's websites or to the MSAR, medical school admissions requirements that we talked about earlier, and see whether they do indeed have an early decision program. And again, evaluate the risk versus reward. So if everything is just spot on, exceptional alignment with the mission, fit, location, preference, cost, all of that converges onto one medical school, yeah, maybe do that. Maybe utilize the early decision option. Something to consider is that if you do not get accepted into the early decision program at most medical schools, something cool will happen, which is that they will automatically roll you over into the regular decision program, and they will release your application so that you can then apply to other schools as well. The downside to this is typically the time by which they do that on the calendar, we'll say like June, July, August kind of thing, and maybe the deadline for early decision is in September, and then suddenly next thing you know, you didn't get accepted via early decision and it's October or November. Well, one thing you're going to find is that how early you apply to medical school is an important factor in whether or not you get accepted. And typically, by the time that a school releases your application from their early decision program due to your not being accepted in that program, it is so late in the cycle that it is very, very difficult to kind of get your ducks in a row, get those other applications sent out to other schools. Those schools are already accepting applicants left and right. And many times people who go that route, they apply early decision, don't get accepted, and then apply to other schools, they don't get accepted anywhere. It ends up being a waste of time and money, and it's very, very discouraging. So again, risk versus reward. My encouragement to you, my recommendation to you, is that you talk to the school. See what it is that they want in their early decision applicants. Do they want something different than what they want in their regular decision applicants? The school that I attended did, in fact. They said, well, our regular decision applicants look like this, but our early decision applicants are very, very, very aligned with our mission. We look for, in our early decision applicants, we look for alignment first. We're a lot less worried about grades, a lot less worried about scores. We're worried about alignment with our early decision applicants. That may be true for other schools as well, and you will need to talk to them in order to figure this out. So that's early decision. Now, when should you actually make a school list? When should you start thinking about where you want to go to medical school? Well, the answer is right now. Start early. The more work you do now, the less work you have to do later. And trust me, things do not get any easier in this process. The workload kind of ramps up as you get closer to actually applying to medical school. And to have been thinking about this all along and to kind of decided, oh, I'm not going to apply to this school, or I am going to apply to that school. You've done all that kind of stuff. You've gotten a lot of that legwork out of the way. It makes the application process a heck of a lot easier. So I encourage you to start early. There is no time too early to start thinking about this. Of course, the only thing you don't want to do is spend all day, every day thinking about this and forego your other responsibilities. But, if you've got an hour on the weekend, look into medical schools for a little bit. Think about where you want to apply. More work now is less work later, and more work now probably means less stress later, because the stress kind of ramps up in this process away. So use the chip away strategy. Just a little bit of work every week or two, figuring out what you care about in a medical school, calling medical schools, emailing medical schools, looking at open house events, looking at this, looking at that, and then make changes over time as new information comes to light. You find out something about a school and you're like, I like that. I think that kind of moves them up on my list a little bit, if you will. Or I'm not really a fan of that, so maybe I should take them off the list. This is all something you can do over the course of several years, actually. And so I encourage people, if you're a freshman or even a sophomore and you're thinking that you want to go to medical school, and you're actually very certain, I should say, that you want to go to medical school, start this process early, because it sure does help to kind of have a lot of this stuff out of the way. Now, I want to share something with you that I created that may or may not help you. This is the free alternative to the medical school admissions requirements. You can find it here at this link. I updated this link in 2025, in the fall of 2025, and it will continue to, this information will continue to stay there. This Excel sheet cannot be edited in its native form, but you can copy the information into a new sheet and you can begin to build a list for yourself. This is just a snapshot of it. It continues, way down the way, all the way into like school number 200 or so. But what it is just a list of schools, the type of school, their cumulative GPA median, their science GPA median, their median MCAT, and then the breakdown of the different scores on the MCAT for each section, if that information is publicly available. For a lot of schools, it's not, because that's highly specific information. But nonetheless, you can sort this list by any way that you want. Something I would encourage people to do is maybe break these out and put a location in there. Like, for example, I put this one here. There's like a Lake Erie College of Osteopathic Medicine in Florida and Pennsylvania. And so I would encourage people, hey, maybe, put another column for the state that the school is located in. And then you can sort by state. You can sort by type, MD versus DO. You can sort by cumulative GPA median. You can sort by science GPA. You can sort by MCAT. You can sort by all these different things. So this is a spreadsheet that is free for you, something I created a number of years ago. Something I do want to say, there is a disclaimer. This information may not be current. I created this spreadsheet circa 2018 or 2019. This information may have changed, especially these, kind of stats. In fact, they probably have. How much they've changed? Probably not that much. But just keep that in mind. If you want to verify this information, it helps a lot to just jump on the school's website and kind of confirm it. But this is a great way to just see all of the medical schools in the country, MD, MDO, and kind of what they're all about in terms of, different stats, different location, class size, things like that. There it is for you. I hope it's helpful. And guys, that is it. That is all about building a school list, figuring out what's important to you, figuring out where you want to go to medical school. And so with that, we'll see you in the next module.